Great. This is lecture number 12. Only one more lecture following this one. We'll be halfway through the course. Last time we were together, we talked about a number of things to include the Northwest Ordinance created in Northwest Territory, St. Clair's defeat. I think you became very familiar with Little Turtle. You'll see Little Turtle in the future. We also talked about Shays' Rebellion. This was a dangerous situation. Made an attempt to overtake the federal arsenal at Springfield. I think I also mentioned to you about the proposal for a constitutional convention at Annapolis. I'll show you a photograph of that in just a few minutes. The old State House. Let's see, what else we talk about? I think we mentioned here about the Founding Fathers. Constitutional convention there. George Washington was president. And we even give credit for being the father of the United States Constitution to that of James Madison. All right, so let me flip my camera here, and I want to show you, I promised this to you the other day, but I want to show you a photograph here of the State House, which is present in Annapolis. If you get a chance to visit Annapolis, you will find it to be a beautiful, beautiful place right on the Chesapeake itself. You're actually looking from the Bay Area and looking uphill to the old State House. George Washington was present here for a period of time. In fact, he resigned his commission in the Continental Army, the United States Army, at this location here. A lot of history associated with it. It is open to the public and it's free. All right, so let's spend a few minutes talking about the United States Constitution. In fact, we'll spend more than a few minutes talking about this. It's a big topic here. And one of the questions that arose here, where does sovereignty lie? And if you're not familiar with this word sovereignty, sovereignty means power. And that's actually quite easy to answer with that. So where does sovereignty lie? It lies with the people. If we read the preamble to the Constitution, we the people, we the people. The other question that we had was the question of limiting power. And that's a little bit more complex with that. Now, under the Constitution, no state will have the authority to defy the Constitution. The federal government will have broad powers, will have the power to tax, to regulate trade, control the currency, raise an army, raise a navy, and to pass laws fitting and proper for the betterment of our country here. One of the basic things we had to come up with was a separation of powers here. Let me remove my hat. I'm sorry that I had that on. And anyway, separation of powers. And what I mean by that is we have a legislative branch, an executive branch, judiciary branch, with none of those branches supposedly any stronger than any of the other branches here. This is a system of checks and balances. We have a House of Representatives, and we also have a Senate. The House can pass a resolution, but if the Senate doesn't go along with it, then it's a dead resolution with that. If the House and the Senate agree upon something, then the President, as the executive, as part of the executive branch, has a decision that he can go along with it, pass it into law, or he can veto it. That's not the end of the line. The bills now may go back to the House of Origin and may be revoted, and if we have a 2/3 vote in the House and a 2/3 vote in the Senate, then we can override the President's veto. It's a system of checks and balances, and it's all a very, very good system, and we don't need to change any of it either here. In addition to this, we'll find that members of Congress are elected on alternating terms for different years. In other words, if you're in the House of Representatives, it's 4 years. If you're in the Senate, it is for 6 years. All of this is a system of checks and balances. Federal judges, federal justices are nominated by the President, confirmed by the Senate, and they serve for life. All right, so anyway, let's go back to my camera here, and I want to give you a date here. And this date is September the 17th, 1787. If you don't recognize that date, we refer to that as Constitution Day here. 39 delegates. I think your textbook indicates 38 signatories, but it's 39 delegates signed the Constitution. And Benjamin Franklin closed this out by saying, and addressing to George Washington and the other members, "Thus I consent, sir, to this Constitution, because I expect no better, and because I'm not sure it is not the best." And that was Benjamin Franklin. All right, now it says in the Constitution that before the Constitution becomes law, we have to have 9 of the 13 states to ratify it. So what this means is we're going to have to form ratifying conventions in each of these states. And all of these states did so with the exception of Rhode Island. All right, now, not everybody was in support of the Constitution. We did, however, have many that were, and we refer to those that are are supportive of ratifying the Constitution as a Federalist. Now, this group will later become the first political party in our country, known as the Federalist Party here. George Washington, John Adams, and Benjamin Franklin were all Federalists. And in fact, almost all of those founding fathers were Federalists at this time. Those that opposed this, they were referred to quite simply as just the anti-Federalists. So let me give you some terms here, and we can see, I can't read my writing here upside down, but to drum up support for the ratifying of the Constitution, three individuals, you can see their names here if you can read my writing anyway, Alexander Hamilton, James Madison, and John Jay, wrote a series of essays. In fact, there were 85 essays, and they were published under the pseudonym of Publius. All right, Publius. Later, these 88 essays would be assembled and collated into what is referred to as the Federalist Papers. And I wish you would recognize that. I want you to recognize the Federalist Papers here. I will tell you that I've read a number of these Federalist Papers, these essays, and honestly here, my friends, if any of you have trouble sleeping at night, I would recommend that you just get online and try to access some of these essays, and you'll find yourself sleeping like a newborn baby. That's the way it works with most people. Now, for those that opposed, who were known as the anti-Federalists, the one thing that they were demanding, they were so afraid of an autocracy here. And one of the things that they were, an abuse of power by the government, they were demanding a Bill of Rights. A Bill of Rights, which of course would protect the rights of the individual itself. And so that's going to be a big point of contention with this. All right, now I'm going to go through the Constitution in a little bit, but I'm going to wait for a more appropriate point, more appropriate time. And anyway, like I said a second ago, throughout the winter of 1787 and 1788, all of these states would form ratifying committees with the exception of Rhode Island, and to decide, do we ratify the Constitution or do we not ratify the Constitution? All right, so anyway, so let me share some things with you. I don't know if I've expressed this to you good folks before, but I have fascination with coins, fascination with currency, and I collect these, of course. Been collecting these for many, many years. And I don't know if you're familiar with what's called the statehood quarters. And the statehood quarters, which came out about 1999 for the next 10 years. And if we look at our, let's see, do I have this right? And I do. And let's see if I can kind of darken this a little bit so you can see this a little bit better. But our first state to ratify the Constitution was Delaware. And you can see as Delaware's motto, the first state. Let me get my fingers out of the way so you can actually see this a little bit. And Delaware was the first state to ratify the Constitution on 7th December 1789. And after that, we'll find the second state to ratify the Constitution. And let's see if I can get this where you can see this. This is Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania, the Keystone State, ratified the Constitution 12th December 1787. Don't forget, it requires 9 states to have a ratified Constitution. And we see the third state, and this state is Massachusetts, that will ratify, and you can see the date there, 18th December 1787. And if you look carefully at this here, if you look carefully at the coin here, and by the way, this is not Massachusetts, this is New Jersey. I'm sorry for that. And if you look carefully at that, you can see Washington crossing the Delaware River, Christmas 1776, crossing the Delaware River from Pennsylvania into New Jersey here. Okay, so that was number 3 here. All of these coins have some significance to it, and that's what I like looking at these statehood quarters or national park quarters, because you get to see some history. All right, our 4th state to ratify the Constitution was Georgia. We're on our way. We're almost halfway. The 5th state to ratify the Constitution was that of Connecticut. And I can't get this to show very well for you folks, but we're over halfway to ratifying the Constitution. And finally, here we go with number 6, which is Massachusetts. And if you look closely at the Massachusetts statehood quarter, let's see if I can get this to do right here. You can see a likeness there of a Minuteman. You can see the Minuteman there. All right, that's a Minuteman that's located at Lexington in Virginia. in Massachusetts. If we look at our next state, State 7, and look carefully at that, let's see if I can get it for you. And you can see the old State House there at Annapolis that I showed you a photograph of just a few minutes ago. All right, that gives us State 7. We need 2 more states to ratify the Constitution, and we are going to get State number 8 here, if I can get it positioned right here. And State number 8 is South Carolina in 23rd of May in 1798. All right, and on we go here with the last one to ratify the Constitution, to where we know that it's actually going to go into law of the land here is that of New Hampshire. You can see the likeness there of what's called the Old Man in the Mountain, which has since fallen away there, so that likeness is no longer there. 2 other states signed ratified the Constitution, and we will find that Virginia becomes state number 10 here. If you look carefully at the coin, you can see the 3 ships there. Those 3 ships, the Discovery, the Susan Constant, and the Godspeed. Those are the ships that went into Jamestown. And then finally, we have New York that ratifies the Constitution as state number 11. And those were the only states at that point that ratified the Constitution, state number 11. So we do have a ratified document here, and it does become the law of the land. No state has the authority to defy the Constitution. All right, now it's time for us to go through the Constitution. So I want you to turn in your textbook, please. And this is on page A7 in your textbook. I'm going to try to work this out for you folks. And we'll spend a few minutes going through this, probably more than a few minutes. And I'm going to dictate some of this to you, good folks, try to show you where this is here. And if you're like me at some time in your educational past, you had to memorize this, and I did. But it goes like this: we, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish the Constitution for the United States of America. Let's read on down here. It tells you all legislative powers shall herein be granted, shall be invested in the Congress of the United States, which shall consist of a Senate and House of Representatives. Down at section 2, the House of Representatives shall be composed of members chosen every 2nd year by the people of the several states and the electors in each state. No person shall be a representative who shall not have attained to the age of 25 years of age and been 7 years a citizen of the United States. And at this point in the class, I would ask you, how many of you can run as a member of the House of Representatives from the state of Alabama? And you would give me an indication, yes or no, by raising your hand. All right, down at the bottom here, the House of Representatives shall choose the Speaker of the House and other officers, and shall have the sole power of impeachment. And that's the way the system works here, folks. All right, let's go over to the other side here, up at the top here, and you may not can read this, but I'm hoping you're following along in your textbook with this. The Senate of the United States shall be composed of 2 senators from each state, chosen by the legislature thereof for 6 years, and each senator shall have 1 vote. No person, so we're going down here, no person shall be a senator who shall not have attained to the age of 30 years and been 9 years a citizen of the United States. And I'm asking for a show of hands. Nobody will see it except yourself. How many of you could run for senator for the state of Alabama here? All right. The Senate shall have the sole power to try all impeachments. So it's a House that brings impeachment charges, and then we have the trial to actually take place in the Senate. Most of you probably witnessed that dog and pony show back earlier in the year, and I'm very, very unjust with that. And I have further comments to make on that in just a little bit. All right, so let's move over a page. Bear with me for just a second as I get this organized. All right, and we're on the next page now, Appendix 8 here. And let's see here, I'm down in this section here. All bills for raising revenue shall originate in the House of Representatives, but the Senate may propose or concur with amendments as other bills. Every bill shall have passed the House of Representatives, and the Senate shall, before it becomes law, be presented to the President of the United States. If he approves and shall sign it, it becomes law. If he does not, then it returns to the House of Origin. And as I told you earlier, it can be overridden, if you will, by a 2/3 vote. All right, let's move over into the next column, and let's see here. Where am I? I'll tell you what, let me try to get a little darkening this so perhaps you can see it a little bit better here. The Congress shall have the power to lay and collect taxes, duties, imposts, and excises, to borrow money on the credit of the United States, to regulate commerce, trade, to coin money, to establish post offices and post roads, to raise and support armies, to provide and maintain a navy. All right, let's go to our next page, and we'll get through this sooner or later here. All right, I'm down in this area right here. Okay, the executive power shall be vested in the President of the United States of America. He shall hold his office during the term of 4 years, and together with the Vice President, chosen for the same term, and be elected as follows. And it explains that to you. All right, let me see where we are here. I'm on page A9, and I think I'm right in this person. No. Here we are, right here. No person except a natural-born citizen or a citizen of the United States at the time of the adoption of the Constitution shall be eligible to the office of President. Neither shall any person be eligible to that office who shall not have attained to the age of 35 years and been 14 years a resident of the United States. And once again, I would be asking you, how many of you folks could run for President of the United States? All right, we're going through an election right now, or actually through a campaign in preparation for an election. All this nonsense that's going around here. My vote goes for Arnold Schwarzenegger. Don't you think so? Wouldn't that be a great person to choose as your nominee for the President of the United States? And why can we not do that? Arnold Schwarzenegger was not born in the United States of America. He is an American citizen, but he was not born there. All right, let's see here. And I want to go to the next page here, and we're almost through with this, so you're being very patient with me, and I appreciate that very much. All right, let's go down into this area right here. The President, Vice President, and all civil officers of the United States shall be removed from office on impeachment for and conviction of, and I want all of you to pay very, very close attention to this, and I hope you can read this. And what it tells you here, for conviction of treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors. In the history of our country, we have had 3 impeachments. We'll go through one of these this semester, which is Andrew Johnson. Next semester, we'll go through 2 other impeachments there, with William Jefferson Clinton and Donald Trump. In each of those impeachments, it was all done on party dislike of the President of the United States, the opposite party disliking that individual. It is a travesty. It tells you there in the Constitution. It's right there in front of you. I'll read it for you. For conviction of treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors. And in no case did we have those requirements satisfied here. You just had a vindictive House of Representatives that was out to get the president. You know, in the case of Bill Clinton, it was Republicans. In the case of Donald Trump, it was a Democrats here. All right, and it's a nasty, nasty affair here, folks. My feeling on this, we have set a precedent that in the future, any president that is of a different party than that of the House of Representatives will be impeached. And you just wait and see with that. We've taken away the power of impeachment and the importance of impeachment, and I'm sorry for that. All right, so anyway, let's move on, but I'm going to still stay with my documents camera here for a second here, and we're about to wrap this up, and I would ask you at this point here, what was the one thing that the Anti-Federalists were insisting upon? And they were insisting upon a Bill of Rights. All right, so let's take just a couple of seconds here, and let's go through these Bill of Rights here, and we're going to start up here with Article 1, which is Amendment number 1 to the Constitution. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, or prohibiting for free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, or the press, or the right of people to peacefully assemble. But notice it says there, to peaceably assemble. Article 2, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of the free state. And I want you to read this very, very, very closely here, folks. It's in the Constitution. It causes a lot of controversy and strife in our country today. The right of people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. And we have a lot of people that are making a big, big deal out of that. And you know, if you're going to have gun regulation here, folks, this means that we're going to have an amendment to the Constitution. You can't just arbitrarily say that guns are not allowed here. It is stated in the Constitution that you do have a right to that. Article 3, no soldier shall in time of peace be quartered in any house without the consent of the people. If we go down to number 4, which is here, the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated. Number 5, no person shall be held to answer for a capital or otherwise infamous crime unless on a presentment or indictment of a grand jury. Article 6, the accused shall enjoy the right to a speedy trial and a public trial by an impartial jury. All right, if we move on here, if we look at number 8, excessive bail shall not be required, nor excessive fines imposed, nor cruel and unusual punishment. And number 10, and this is a good one, number 10, the powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it, they are reserved for the states themselves. So if it's not covered in the Constitution, the state has the authority to address that itself. All right, now we spent a few minutes here talking about the Constitution, and I think that's important. And I would bet that you have not gone into it in that depth, in any of your earlier history courses here. And if that is the case, that is a shame here. All right, so anyway, let's see where we are here. The Constitution provides for the election of a president. I've got to spend a few minutes on this because this is a little bit tricky to understand. And George Washington was elected, I want to tell you, unanimously, and it's kind of that way. But he was elected president here. You see 69 votes, electoral votes, and he will be inaugurated at Federal Hall on the 30th of April, 1789. That's in New York City here. That Bible that he was sworn into office in is still preserved to this day. Occasionally, a president being sworn into office will use that same Bible that George Washington did. He was not in a military uniform. He was actually in a brown suit, had white stockings, he had leather shoes that had silver buckles on it. All right, so anyway, John Adams was chosen as vice president. All right, now I'm going to go back to myself here, and let's try to get it to lighten a little bit. And I want to try to explain this to you. And it's easier if I use a display here, and I'm going to use this here. All right, now, the way it works is that each elector has 2 votes. So I'm going to use my fingers here. Each elector has 2 votes. And so what you do, you vote for 2 individuals. You vote for one individual, you vote for a second individual, and the individual collectively that receives the greatest number of votes, the greatest number of votes, that individual is the president. The person that gets the second highest number of votes, that person is the vice president. Now it's important again, I'm going to use my fingers, that each elector has 2 votes. Each elector gets 2 votes. So if we look at the election results here and look on this little bar graph, what is in green, which is right here, that represents 69 votes that George Washington got. If we look to the next one here, which is the yellow, this represents the number of votes that John Adams received. So that means, according to the system that we had at that time, George Washington received 69 votes, which means every elector voted for George Washington. But then you can see, going across like this, how the electors voted for a second candidate. So there were many, many other candidates that were chosen too. Please remember that. So I would ask you, if you were in class right now, how many votes does each elector have? And they have 2 votes. They have 2 votes. You vote for 2 of the candidates here. It's going to be very important here as we go through some of these other elections. We've got a problem with the system. We've got to get that system straightened out. And it's going to take us a while. It's going to take several presidential elections for us to do this. All right, so let's go back to my camera here, and we'll take a look at George Washington's early cabinet. And if you can read my writing there, we have Thomas Jefferson, you have Alexander Hamilton, Thomas Jefferson, Secretary of State, Alexander Hamilton, who was Secretary of Treasury, Henry Knox, the Secretary of War, Edmund Randolph was the Attorney General, and the Postmaster General was Samuel Osgood. You can't read the name right there. And that was the early cabinet, and that's it. And that's it. I wish we could say something like that today, but unfortunately we cannot. The cabinet level positions have grown enormously. I want to share some photographs with you here, and I think it'd be easier to try to do it this way. This is a portrait of George Washington. We did not have photography back during that time. Notice that he is not smiling. Notice there that it appears that if he has a bad case of dandruff on his shoulders, and that's just not the case. That's the powder from the powdered wig that fell off of his powdered wig onto his shoulders right there. George Washington is not smiling. He had was embarrassed with his teeth. His teeth were broken. The way the stories go, he attempted to open hickory nuts with his central incisors. As I told you before, you're not a squirrel. You're not going to win that battle with that. So anyway, that's George Washington. I want to share something else with you very quickly here. I would have this on display for you in class, but these are actually George Washington's dentures, and they were not made out of wood. George Washington at one time had teeth that were metal teeth. It was kind of like the original grill, but in this case, this photograph here is showing his George Washington's dentures. These teeth, which have been planted in a mold there that fits in the mouth, or came out of a cow. They're bovine teeth there. So you can imagine if you had dentures such as that, would you do a lot of smiling? I bet you that you would not. All right, let me share another photograph, and this shows indicates the early cabinet of George Washington. We see George Washington, which is right here. The other individual next to him, this individual is Henry Knox. It looks like I had my finger up his nose. Henry Knox here. Henry Knox, Secretary of War. The man that's standing in the center, is supposedly a very handsome individual, is Alexander Hamilton, Secretary of Treasury. This individual here is Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson, who was Secretary of the Treasury. And then we have Edmund Randolph here. It's over on that position here, okay, as Attorney General. So that was the early cabinet, for George Washington. All right, let's see what else we need to mention. I've already talked about the Bill of Rights here, and I want to address here. All right, let's go back here, and let's go back to our documents camera. And if you read through the Constitution, it makes very little reference to the Supreme Court. It really does. There's very little reference that is made to that. Now, one of the acts that Congress will pass is known as the Judiciary Act of 1789. I want you to remember that, Judiciary Act of 1789. And this established a Supreme Court that had one Chief Justice of the United States, and that's the proper title for it. It's the Chief Justice of the United States, not Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. And we had 5 Associate Justices. All right, now today in our present Supreme Court, we have 9 justices. We have 1 Chief Justice, John Roberts, and we have 8 Associate Justices. All right, we're having a little stirring of rumors here to try to change that number and elevate the number to 15. And that's just, in my opinion here, my friends, that's just posturing to try to gain control of the Supreme Court. All right, so anyway, that's that Judiciary Act of 1789. It's also created 13 federal district courts with 13 federal district judges. Okay, now the most prominent individual in the cabinet of George Washington, let's see, I'm going to get this away here, was that of Alexander Hamilton. And I will show you a likeness here of Alexander Hamilton. Here's what he looked like. They say he's a nice-looking individual. He had actually been a colonel in the Revolutionary War under George Washington, and a very, very brave, very heroic individual, perhaps foolhardy individual, too. But Alexander Hamilton was born in 1755. Let's get this off here, and was born in the British West Indies on an island which is called Nevis. This is a home in which Alexander Hamilton was born in. To get there, your best bet is to fly or either take a cruise ship into St. Kitts and then take a little ferry that runs out about 45 minutes out into this Caribbean island in the British West Indies, which is known as Nevis. Fun place to visit. They will charge you to go into this house. Notice how low the windows are. So if you just walk around the house and you just look in the windows, you can do it all for free. All right, so anyway, that's Alexander Hamilton. Alexander Hamilton, I'll go back to his likeness here. Alexander Hamilton was an illegitimate son of a worthless Scot, but his mother took care of him. He was well educated. He was sent to Columbia and got a law degree in New York, and a very, very intelligent individual. Now, Alexander Hamilton, what he wanted to do was to establish a national bank. And this bank would be established. It would be called the First National Bank. And I mean not like First National Bank downtown Jasper or whatever. It was the First National Bank. Established in Philadelphia. The other day when I was showing you a diagram of Philadelphia, of the old city, and I said, here's a couple other places here. I don't want to mention the names of them, but one of those places was known as First National Bank, and the other one was the Second National Bank, Second Bank of the United States here. Now, Alexander Hamilton was in full support of this bank, and what he wanted to do to support this was to establish an excise tax on distilled alcohol and also an import tariff. Now, the import tariff means that goods coming into this country, it gets a tariff placed upon them. I can understand that. But the excise tax on distilled alcohol. Now, what happens here is that we had farmers that were in the western parts of Pennsylvania and North Carolina and Virginia were growing bumper crops of corn. Now, I wonder what you would do with that corn, the excess corn that you would not use for human consumption or for livestock feed. Well, what these farmers were doing, they were actually distilling corn whiskey. And Alexander Hamilton was taking the position, that's fine. If you want to do that and distill that corn whiskey, that's fine, but you're going to have to pay a tax on it. And nevertheless here, it worked very, very well. It worked quite well, as a matter of fact, and it just swelled the treasury there to the national First National Bank. Now, Alexander Hamilton also wanted to push through a bill into Congress in which the United States government would assume state debts. Many of these states had accrued large debts from the Revolutionary War, and Alexander Hamilton wanted to eliminate those. Well, for some of the southern states, they had already paid off the Revolutionary War debts, and they were unhappy with this. And so to appease these southern representatives, Alexander Hamilton proposed what was known as the Assumption Bill. All right. Now, under the Assumption Bill, the states would have their debts paid from the Revolutionary War, and in turn, the nation's capital would be moved closer to the south. And in fact, why not move it not very far from where George Washington's home is, which is present at Mount Vernon on the Potomac River. And of course, the new capital would be named for George Washington. You know what I'm talking about with Washington in the District of Columbia. So we do have that established here. Now, many Americans, many people that were in Congress felt like that the Federalist Party was just becoming too powerful here. They were self-interested and overbearing majority. And so two individuals, Thomas Jefferson and James Madison, proposed creating a new political party. And this political party, which would be called the Republican Party, which would serve to be the rival of that of the Federalist Party. This is not the Republican Party we have today. This Republican Party will cease to be, and the Republican Party that we have today emerged in the 1850s here. All righty, so anyway, let's move on to the election of 1792. George Washington was reelected as president. At that time, John Adams would be the vice president. All right, now in 1794, a group of farmers that were actually corn farmers in the western parts of Pennsylvania staged a revolt, and they refused to pay this excise tax that Alexander had proposed upon distilled alcohol. And so these farmers rebelled against this. Now, what this is referred to as is a whiskey rebellion. And George Washington, the commander-in-chief of our country, the president of our country, personally led an army, I can only imagine the president today and our previous presidents attempting to do that, but led an army of about 14,000 and went into the Pennsylvania countryside to try to, and did squash this rebellion. And actually, the people that were rebelling just vanished into the wind with that. I want you to recognize that. That is known as the Whiskey Rebellion. All right, let's move on a little bit here, folks. By 1789, North Carolina became our 12th state to ratify the Constitution. 1790, Rhode Island became our next 13th state to ratify the Constitution. 1791, we even have a new state, not a part of the 13 original colonies. In 1791, Vermont becomes our 14th state. 1792, Kentucky becomes our 15th state. 1796, Tennessee, the volunteer state, becomes our 16th state in the United States Constitution, in the United States. And we're going to stick with that for a while. All right, let's move on. I'm running out of time here, folks. And I want to tell you about a couple of other events. England and France were at war. And it was a nasty war. It was taking place around the year 1792. I wrote the date here, 1793. But on this date, America, by the way, was maintaining neutrality. We established Neutrality Act. We're not going to get involved in this. But in 1793, a Frenchman, who's known as Edmond Genet, they referred to him as Citizen Genet, actually sailed across the ocean and did not go to Washington, D.C. or Philadelphia to meet the president, but and that would have been the normal thing to do as diplomatic courtesy, but he actually went into Charleston, South Carolina, and tried to make arrangements here to use the harbor there at Charleston as a wayfaring station for French ships, and also he tried to recruit Americans to fight on the French side against the Spanish and the British down in Florida. Well, this has all the appearances that the United States is not being neutral at all. So Great Britain began to halt American ships on the high seas. They began to take our sailors, our merchant sailors, and press them into British service. They were harassing our ships, destroying some of our ships. In addition to this, we did not have a trade agreement with Great Britain. And in addition to that, Great Britain was also moving some of its frontier outposts into the Ohio Valley. So consequently, a man by the name of John Jay, he was the first Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of the United States. John Jay was dispatched by George Washington to go to London and establish Jay's Treaty. It sounds good, but it's really not that good. It gave a more favorable trade agreement to Great Britain. Great Britain did agree that they would remove the frontier outposts. They agreed that they would stop impressment of U.S. merchant mariners, but they refused to give compensation, for the damage to the ships. All right, that was known as Jay's Treaty. One that we did benefit from is Pinckney's Treaty. This is Thomas Pinckney from South Carolina, and established Pinckney's Treaty in 1795, which gave us uncontested rights to navigate the Mississippi River. And this was done with Spain, by the way. And it also gave us the authority to use New Orleans, which was a Spanish-controlled city. We could use New Orleans as a port city. So anyway, and I failed to mention, it established another northern boundary between Spanish-held Florida and the United States on the 20th parallel, which is about where it is today, where the Florida line and the Alabama line is located today. All righty, folks, that's about enough for today here. I'm going to go back to me for just a jiffy here, and we'll continue on with this. We've got a couple more interesting presidential elections to talk about. Next time we'll get together, 1796, and particularly the one of 1800. All right, you folks have a good day.